Welcome back to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. I've referenced several traditional leadership theories during the course of this podcast. These include the great man theory, transformational leadership, and situational leadership, just to name a few. These theories are an effort to describe and classify why certain people become leaders. Is it a trait or set of characteristics? Is it a specific mindset or a chain of events? By naming the why, these theories hope to point the way to great leadership. Today, I want to scratch below the theories and look at styles. Rather than occupy ourselves with the why, this conversation will focus on how. What are some of the ways leadership shows up, and what behaviors distinguish certain styles? I particularly enjoy the play on words that leadership style offers, because it's very like choosing an outfit. What style will you wear when you walk out into the world to lead? While the frameworks built by various theories and the styles connected with each are very closely related, my intent today is to help you get clear on what style your leadership is wearing, how people see and experience you as a leader. I'm fortunate to have Paul Thornton as my guest today, because Paul literally wrote the book on this topic: Leadership Styles, Directing, Discussing, Delegating. In addition to this title, he has published more than a dozen other books focusing on leadership skills and success. His mission is to help parents, teachers, coaches, and team leaders become more effective managers and leaders. And I can't think of a better guest to join me for today's conversation. Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, Paul. I'm really glad to have you with me this morning and would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself, please.
Well, first of all, Kate, thank you for having me on. I've been a student and teacher of leadership for the past 40 years. I love the subject. I think there's a lot to learn about it. There's a lot of different theories and models and concepts. I've been a leader in various situations. I've done coaching of people to help them become better leaders. I've written a lot of books on the
Mm-hmm.
subject, so I think I have a lot of the theory and concepts to it. And I've actually done some leading, so I think I have practical, real world experience
Mm-hmm.
doing it.
Yeah,
So,
that's an important point, that
yeah,
there's theory and practice. And
you got that right.
that's actually kind of the whole intent of today's conversation, is to say, yes, theories are important because it helps us figure out how practice can happen.
Hmm.
But really, at the end of the day, how you show up, how you behave, how you lead is kind of the thing that actually matters, regardless
Hmm.
of whatever theory you espouse. And there are some things where I think theory is sufficient, but when it comes to people leadership, you need to have that experience.
Mm.
Um, and I think the best place for us to start is what are the indicators of great leadership? If we're going to talk about leading better, what does that actually look like?
Mm.
Love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I good question. I think that leaders. When I think about leaders, I'm thinking about could be a parent,
Mm-hmm.
teacher, athletic coach, team leader, manager. So it's a wide spectrum of people that can take on this leadership role. But when I think some of the really good leaders or great leaders, kind of three things come to mind. Number one, they, of course, set a good example. They have strong alignment with what they say and do. They have credibility. Number two, they're able to diagnose the situation they're in. They're good at, as they say, reading the room. They can figure out what's going on, what's the biggest problem or issue. Um, And then thirdly, they provide the right amount of what's needed. Think about like coaching or giving
Mm-hmm.
feedback or delegating. You can do too much of it or you can do too little. And providing the right amount is going to help the person maximize their effectiveness. Uh, Too much information, too much feedback is really not helpful. I play tennis and I've had various tennis coaches over the years, and on occasion, the tennis coach will tell me, 8 things to remember, and
Mm-hmm.
my head is spinning. You've heard that example before.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in your head that you forget to even, hit the ball.
Yes.
So, again, providing the right amount of feedback, the right amount of coaching, the right amount of direction is going to be most helpful. So, the really great leaders, I think, know the sweet spot of what's appropriate. Now, I'm not saying you always are in the middle of, the spectrum. Sometimes you need to provide a lot of feedback. Sometimes you need to provide very little. Sometimes coaching might take a minute, and other times it might take
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes, so it varies. So I think those are 3 things that come to mind that,
Yeah.
highlight some of the really, really effective leaders.
Yeah. I heard you talk about credibility right off the bat,
Yeah.
setting an example, being consistent, and that reading the room, the diagnosing the situation, and doing the thing that's appropriate
Hmm.
to it. Um, I would shorthand that as discernment. I think I would add awareness. And I also see that that's somewhat rolled up into credibility and discernment too. I
Hmm.
like to call it out that there's that awareness of me,
Hmm.
awareness of others, and awareness of circumstances
Hmm.
too.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the leader certainly needs to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be aware of what you stand for, your beliefs, your values, and that's really important. Aware of the situation you're in,
Yeah.
what's going on, looking at the hard data, the numbers tell you a story. Looking at what people are feeling, that's also important.
Yeah.
They say
Definitely.
leaders have to connect with people's hearts and minds, and to connect with their hearts, you got to understand what are they feeling. What's their emotional
Mm-hmm.
uh, emotions at the moment. That's all important as well.
Yeah. I always like to add, yeah, I think hearts and hands, or sorry, hearts and minds, or the head and the heart are
Yeah.
great, touchstones for us to talk about in leadership. And I always like to add hands, that
Hmm.
we're really trying to get that whole self
I
involved.
agree. Yep.
What people think, what they feel, and what they do.
Yep.
And while we can't dictate uh, thought or feeling, we want to be aware of it. And those are the best leaders that recognize that they have to take that into account if the hands are going to do the necessary work.
Hmm.
I'm jumping around a little bit because you mentioned this right off the bat, and I want to call out how much I appreciate that you recognize that leadership is not limited to a title or even the business setting.
Mm.
Because that's something that, because so much of my preoccupation is with people managers,
Hmm.
as a consultant, even in the form of this podcast. That's not the only place you see leadership, though.
Hmm.
So I'd like to take just a little bit of time to chew over the idea of why is it important for us to talk about leadership in other venues.
Well, I think it's important because everyone, as we talked about before, has the opportunity to step up and make a difference and add value. For example, my 12-year-old grandson, a couple weeks back, um, one of his classmates was bullying another
Mm.
classmate. And he observed this and knew it was wrong. And he went over and confronted the bully and said, "What you're doing to Jason isn't right. You know, it's hurtful, and he's a good guy, and you shouldn't be saying what you're saying. You need to go and apologize to him." And, to me, that I was so proud of my grandson.
Yeah.
And here's an example of a 12-year-old child stepping up and making a difference and adding value and influencing the person, the bully, to realize what they were doing was wrong, you
Yeah.
know? And I think the bully was doing it to get attention and, all that. So to your point, from a 12-year-old up to a 90-year-old, there's plenty of opportunities to um, speak up, say something, do something that's going to help the person or the situation improve or be more effective or align more with your values, that type of thing. So there's all sorts of opportunities. No, you don't need the title of you're a leader. No, anyone, if they're willing, you know, if they're willing. Now, being a leader, you have to bring up difficult topics. You have to give some candid feedback. You have to confront difficult people like this bully, as I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned. It's not always easy. It's not always fun and games. It's difficult. And a lot of people would rather not have the conflict or, get into the issue with the person. And so they say nothing and do nothing and,
Yeah.
life goes on. So I agree with you though. There's plenty of opportunities for all of us to take on this quote leadership role.
Mm-hmm. I had the chance recently. I met a young woman who is a um, high school teacher by training and has moved into a role where she is now uh, kind of supporting and leading fundraising programs for high school students
Yep.
connected to a nonprofit. She's coordinating the work that they do, and her focus is not on. I mean, obviously, the fundraising is important. The mission of this particular
Mm-hmm.
organization is really important to her. But her focus is on developing leadership skills in those students. I'm hoping to have her on the podcast in the spring
Mm-hmm.
as well. But we had this really wonderful conversation about that she is working this long game, that what she's doing is creating that next generation of people that are able to have courage, to have influence, to build credibility, all of those pieces. And
Mm-hmm.
it's one, I think it's wildly important work, but also that clarity of understanding that you don't have to have a team of employees, that you can lead from every place
Mm-hmm.
is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it translate over into the workplace too,
Mm-hmm.
that yes, you can have a manager title, but you can also have people leading from the desk.
Yeah.
I come from healthcare. It's something I talk about a lot because it's what I know so
Yeah.
well. And in the field of nursing, there's a concept of the bedside leader, that
Yeah.
even at the bedside, that direct caregiver has leadership responsibility. And
Yeah.
that's something that I really latched onto because I
Mm-hmm.
think we should infuse that across not just the healthcare industry, but everywhere, bedside, desk side, register
Yeah.
side, that we can and should be leading. You talked about choice, your grandson, and by the way, what a great thing to be proud of,
Yeah.
him standing up to a bully.
Yep.
I hope the whole family is celebrating him.
We celebrate him all the time.
Yeah,
And I have five grandsons, and other grandsons have done something similar. So
that's
I'm
awesome.
proud of all of them. This particular one plays ice hockey,
Mm.
and he was just elected captain of his team.
Oh, wow.
He's a team builder, but he's also willing to talk to people when, they're not following team rules or things like that. And he's had several examples again on the role of captain of his team. of speaking up and saying, "Hey, so and so, we agreed we were going to do X, Y, Z, and you're not doing it." You
Mm,
know.
yeah.
So again, I'm blown away by some of these things that my daughter tells me about, and then my grandson fills in the details. So yeah, very
It's
proud.
great. Well, something that you mentioned in that account of his leadership
Yeah,
uh, was the choice. He
yeah,
chose to stand up.
yeah.
Um, he chose to try to influence a peer. And I like talking about choice in this context, frankly, for no other reason than it sort of flies in the face of the great man theory. And while I know that we're focused on style and practice over
Hmm.
theory, I do think it's important to say that some of those theories are fundamentally flawed, and we want to avoid some of the styles associated with them. I particularly like any time I can chip away at the great man theory while it's been broadly debunked. I do think there are some people that are like, this was somebody who was born to lead.
Mm.
Like, no, no. You have to make choices along the way. It is not something that you have no decision making ability in. And that's one of the reasons, choice is one of the reasons I think style is an important conversation for us, because people do choose to lead. You may have some abilities and traits that make it easier for you than for other people. Like your
Hmm.
grandson, you mentioned the term natural leadership abilities, but he is choosing how he administers those, if you
Hmm.
will.
Yeah.
And that choice is where style comes into play. Uh, in your book, Leadership Styles, uh, you outline three particular styles. And I will confess, I've only read the introduction to the book. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. But I like how you start off with, you know, here's a big long list of just some of the styles that are
Yeah.
referenced out in the world,
Hmm.
and how you take a stance to simplify it
Hmm.
and say, really fundamentally, there are three styles: directing, discussing, and delegating.
Hmm.
I'd like to have you walk us through what those are in
Hmm.
their most essential form, please.
Sure. I like to boil things down to make
Mm-hmm.
them as simple as possible and
100%. Yeah.
practical and usable. So you're right. Three styles: directing, you tell the person what to do, how to do it, when to have it done by. Um, if a person has no experience, they've never done the task before, they want and need direction. They want and need a roadmap of steps they need to take to get the job done. When you use a directing style, the person is learning to pay attention, to listen, to ask questions, to then go and do what they need to do to get it done and meet the deadline. And I think those are all very important skills that, people need to learn. Now, one of the problems with the directing style is sometimes people use the style when the person knows what to do. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like micromanaging, the person's done it 28 times. You don't have to be telling them one more time what they need to do. They know. So don't use it inappropriately. Use it when there's a need. You also might want to use the directing style in a crisis or an emergency situation. If the house is burning down, you want someone to very quickly make decisions, give directions, tell people what to do. The second style, discussing. Basically, like you're doing today, you're asking questions. The leader asks questions to see what the person thinks about certain problems and opportunities, how they would proceed, what steps they would take if they were going to take on this project. When you use a discussing style, the person learns to think because you're asking them questions, so they got to think of an answer. They're learning to collaborate if you're in a group setting. build on the ideas of others. They're also learning when it's time to make a decision. Discussion is good, but at some point, you got to make a decision. Matter of fact, that's one of the problems with the discussing style. You and I have all seen some managers that go on and on and on and on, some meetings, and nothing is decided.
Mm.
That's not productive. So at some point, a decision needs to be made. And then the third style is uh, delegating, where you are giving the person responsibility and authority to, on their own, do whatever they think they need to do to get the task done, right? You're empowering them. That's appropriate, of course, when the person has some experience and some know-how. It's also used maybe as a developmental tool. You want to challenge the person with a project and see how they're going to do. When you use that style, people learn to work independently. On their own, they need to set goals and develop a plan and engage other people and get the resources they need and do whatever's needed to hit the deadline that was agreed upon up front. Now, again, you can misuse this style. A lot of people over delegate to their top performers. They know their one or two superstars will always get the job done in a great way, so they keep delegating to them and they burn them out, and that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure you're delegating appropriately and giving everyone the chance to see, what they can do on their own and how they can develop and what have you. So I think I mentioned it, but when you use a delegating style, people are learning some very important skills also to plan and make decisions and think through options and go to certain people for advice and guidance if need be. So again, those are all important skills. So my point is, you want to, as a leader, you want to help people succeed. So you want to
Yeah.
use a style that's going to help them. And depending on their background and the task that they're assigned to do, you're going to decide what style makes sense. And as a leader, also, you need to be flexible and adjust as needed. I might start out using a directing style, but realize, well, this person, they're very competent and capable, and move to a discussion and ask some questions. How would you do this or that? What do you think here? And then even move to delegation. So you need to be flexible and use the style that's going to help the person get the job done. And as I have implied, I think that when you use the right style, secondarily, it's helping the person develop the skills they need for ongoing future success. So that's a side benefit, I guess you will. So
Well,
those are kind of the three styles in a nutshell. But I think we use them all the time. Parents, teachers, coaches, it's something we do. Matter of fact, when I was a manager and leader, in the same meeting, I'd be using all three styles. At
mm-hmm.
times, I'd be directing, other times, we'd be discussing a topic, other times, I'd be delegating to this one or that one to take on this project and get it done by this date. So every day, I would use all three styles. And like I say, in some meetings, I would use all three styles. So
Yeah.
I guess in a nutshell, those are the three styles,
I love it. Now,
the three Ds.
yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention situational leadership,
Yeah.
because it's something that some people listening may be familiar with. And I know that you have had the opportunity to do some study with Dr. Hersey. You're very familiar with Dr. Blanchard as well. I like this take or evolution, if you will, of the situational leadership framework or theory because it is so simplified.
Yeah.
I think it gives a much, it's more intuitive.
Yeah.
His,
I
yeah.
was fortunate, Kate, in college to have both Professor Hersey and Professor Blanchard as my instructors. And
That is
Professor
awesome.
Hersey, incidentally, was a phenomenal teacher, and he taught his class using the four styles that are described in the situational leadership model. Beginning of the semester, he was very directing. Then he got into quadrant two, quadrant three. We had more discussions. And then near the last 2 to 3 weeks of the semester, he delegated.
Hmm.
We had to go out and do different things, interview people, analyze case studies and what have you. But great teacher. Um, I always thought that I was a little bit confused when he presented it between quadrants two and three. I think quadrant two was selling and quadrant
Hmm.
three was participating. And as I got into the business world and started working and observing and reflecting on, what I was doing as a manager leader, it made sense for me to boil it down to the three basic styles. So that was kind of my evolution of moving from their four to my three. Simplicity for me is very, very, very important.
You are singing my song, sir.
Mm,
The complexity of leadership should not come from how you do it. The people make things complex enough.
yeah, right.
I
Exactly.
I also really appreciate um it just personally it very much resonates with me how you struggled a little bit with that whole idea of selling.
Yeah.
Um I've had a burr in my saddle for a while about the idea of leaders trying to persuade or convince employees to do or not do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that leaders must be dictatorial. It's leadership isn't an act of salesmanship. It's not an act of convincing. That yes, influence does play a role, but the leader's job is to be very clear about this is what's expected of you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it, here's the natural positive consequence. And if you don't, here is the natural negative consequence that will follow. And then being
Mm-hmm.
consistent about that and adapting to the people's needs, yes, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not there to try to like wheedle and convince and persuade people.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to be clear. This is where we're going. This is what we're doing. These are the mindsets that can help you be successful, but I'm not going to tell you how to think. These are the behaviors that are needed because they are directly connected to the results we're trying to achieve, not because I said so. And this is the by when. And even if you are delegating, there has to be this thread of clarity that runs through. So I think it's, when you talk about directing, because maybe it's high stakes or high risk, or it's somebody's first day on the job, you are spelling all of that out. They have no point of reference. They're learning it. As they
Mm-hmm.
become more familiar, as trust is built between you and them, they trust like, oh, Paul is going to tell me exactly what I need to know
Mm-hmm.
and give me feedback and give me an attaboy if I need it.
Mm-hmm.
Or Paul is going to be, fair and just if I make a mistake. Then as you go through discussion and into delegation, you still have to pull forward this, hey, this is what the expected behavior and outcomes are. You may not have to get into as much detail. You may not have to spend as much time,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not there trying to sell to people. And I agree with you. Situational leadership is a fabulous theory. And in practice, the persuading component, the I have to convince people, I've struggled with that in the real world as well, particularly when I've seen leaders use it as an excuse for not getting the results that are needed.
Yeah. Well, I would add to that, Kate, that um, leaders are involved in selling and implementing change. You
Hmm.
know, they want to change the status quo. They want to make things better. And we talked earlier about the idea that the leader can influence and appeal to people's head, heart, and hands. And if I'm trying to implement a major change initiative, I want to get buy-in of my employees. So I got to think about what's going to be most appealing to them. If I present a logical argument with facts and figures, is that going to sell them? Or do I try to connect to their emotions? Do I try to tell a story or relate to how they'll feel once this change is implemented? Or do I appeal to their hands? Do I ask them to try something for 2 weeks and then tell me what they thought, how it worked, what are the benefits, what do they see, you know? So how am I going to do that? Now, depending on, the situation, I am going to engage in a certain amount of selling and trying to influence them to buy into the change that I'm, advocating and want to put in place. But realistically, there are times when, I'm not going to have the opportunity to sell them and convince them. Senior management has said this change is going to be effective, January 1st, and you need to do XYZ to make it happen. And it's much more of a directing style that all of us need to do or use this new technology going forward. You're going to receive a week of training and blah, blah, blah. It's a change that's being put in place, and we all have to get on board and move forward. Other times, if I'm not quite sure on exactly what the change is going to be, I might have a discussion with my team or department on what do they think and what are the pluses and minuses, and get their input and thank them for it, and then decide, tell them once I'm gonna factor their thoughts in and decide what is the best way to go. So again, it's very situational, I think, but you got to look at a lot of different factors and
Yeah.
diagnose what will make the most sense, what's gonna help improve the situation and make things better.
Yeah. So I want to be careful that I don't do one of two or both of two things. I don't want to um, get us off track, and I
Yeah.
don't want to drag us into a debate. But this is something frankly, I feel very strongly about. Because interestingly enough, the whole convincing question is something that I landed where I am on that during change leadership situations, being in those circumstances of consulting and coaching, executive leaders about how they were doing the work of leading change.
Mm-hmm.
And there seemed to be this sense of, well, I just can't convince them.
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe that change leadership is an act of selling. It's not about creating buy-in. It's about increasing and ensuring understanding. And the messages that we craft for people need to appeal in the right measure to the head or heart as we try to engage them in the change. But if a change has been decided upon, whether it's externally like a change in the law, or there's a business need that is driving it, it does nobody any good to spend time in trying to make people quote unquote feel good about it.
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say that you don't have empathy for people's resistance or struggles with change. All of this has to be done with kindness.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the roles of a leader during change is not to convince, but to increase understanding. You want to make certain people understand what the change means for them and what's expected of them before, during, and after.
Yeah.
And if people are not able to become congruent with whatever that change expects of them, you have other difficult decisions and conversations that you have to
Yeah.
address.
Yeah,
So,
I think sometimes leaders don't explain the why the
yes,
change is being made. And
exactly.
I think if you get into the why, that people accept it more, and again, buy in, um, understanding. Let's your word, understanding
Hmm.
is more accepted by the person. Okay, I see what they're
Yeah,
doing and why they're doing it, and okay,
yeah,
I'll get on board. You know.
exactly. But I think you can overlay the styles with the nature of the change and where
Mhm.
people are in that path to understanding, path to comprehension.
Yeah.
Definitely that, initially as they're kind of working through it and trying to understand, depending on the nature of the change, you may be at one end of the spectrum or the other. You may have to be more directing. I'm telling you the what, why, how, when.
Yeah.
Or if it's a long-term change, the stakes aren't very high, there can be more of that discussion and delegation of, hey, go out and experiment with this and come back and
Hmm.
tell me what it's like.
Yeah.
So, I said I didn't want to totally pull us down a path here, but I really love that we've ended up on change
Mm.
because that's one of the places where your style as a leader is so important, and your flexibility and adaptability.
Mm. Yeah.
I'd like to use this chance to go to um, one of the questions that I shared with you because I see a natural connection here. And that's what characteristics and skills can support someone wanting to enter or improve their leadership. Adaptability, I think, is one of the
Mm.
skills that is important in this context.
Mm.
So, what else
Yeah.
would you add?
I think I was thinking about that, and I think curiosity is really important. Um, Being, curious why people think and feel a certain way, probing and digging, understanding the why behind the behavior.
Hmm.
That's very important. I mentioned earlier, I think a very important skill I think that's overlooked is the ability to diagnose situations.
Great.
It's no different than a good doctor is able to diagnose the patient effectively and successfully. A good leader is able to diagnose the environment that they're in and get a clear picture and clear understanding of what's going on and why it's going on, and what are some steps they can take to, as I said before, improve it or make things better. And to your point, certainly adaptability these days, there's so much coming at us, there's so much change happening in the world. You need to be adaptable and flexible and be willing to say, well, this isn't working. I need to try something else, or I need to alter this or tweak this to be more effective.
Mm.
And being open to feedback and being humble that, my way is not always right, and I need to be open and keep learning and growing myself and make changes as needed to be, again, more effective. That's my goal, my ultimate goal. So I think those are some skills or characteristics that leaders need to work on and keep working on.
Yeah.
This this leadership thing, as you know, Kate, is a lifelong journey that we're always trying to learn and gain
Hmm.
new understanding and new insights, and
Yeah.
never ending.
I'm so glad you brought up curiosity, not only because an episode just a few before this one airs addresses curiosity and joy and the connection they have,
Mm.
but curiosity is so beneficial for so many aspects of life and super beneficial for leadership.
Mm.
Um, Everything that you've talked about, like leading by example, you have to be curious about what is it that people see as a method of role modeling. Can I get curious about that?
Mm.
Diagnosis. Diagnosis cannot happen without at least asking yourself
Mm.
questions,
Yeah.
um, and then providing the right amount of what's needed. If you're not curious about what is the right thing and the right amount,
Mm.
you will
Mm.
always miss the mark on that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. Mm.
because I have a framework that I'm kind of constantly working and refining in the back of my mind, and curiosity sits in an important place in it. I want to call out empathy as well.
Mm-hmm.
That empathy, I think, is where leadership and learning, where they start.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in our discussions, that could probably be subbed out for the concept of awareness, whether it's self or other.
Mm-hmm.
Empathy has this part to play in, can I sense the feelings, the interactions, the dynamics? Can I imagine what this is like for someone else? That then, I think, foments curiosity in us. If I'm picturing, if I'm experiencing your feelings, I have an opportunity to become curious about who you are, what
Yeah.
got you there. And then that curiosity can give me courage to ask the hard questions, to do the thing that's
Mm.
necessary,
Yep.
to stand up to the bully.
Yep.
And when I do the thing, I start to develop muscle, I start to develop endurance,
Mm-hmm.
because leading is hard work.
Mm.
People have to be flexible, adaptable, and
Yep.
resilient. And I
Yep.
think that can be somewhat captured in the concept of endurance.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think some leaders, they're empathetic and they get
mhm.
a clear understanding of how people are feeling, but they don't go to the next question of the curiosity of why they're feeling that way. You
Exactly.
know, how long have they been feeling that way? What are the drivers? What are the key factors? What would they like to see happen? You know what I mean?
I
They
do.
kind of stop at one level where if they probed a little bit further, they'd have a deeper, richer understanding of that person.
Yeah,
And then they can help the person more because they have a fuller understanding of what's driving them, where they're at, what's going on in their situation.
agreed. Well, this is an oxymoron, but what you're talking about is objective empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And empathy that doesn't get dressed and walk around, um, it is really just observation at the end of the
Mm.
day. You have to get curious. You've got to be courageous. You've got to step in
Mm.
constantly. And I said you're getting dressed and walking around because that's how I like to think about leadership styles. What outfit am I wearing? And empathy without the decision to walk around is honestly kind of cold,
Mm.
because it doesn't go beyond the I see and understand.
Mm-hmm.
This is another place where I see a natural connection to another question that I shared with you. Paul, I'm curious to know what you see as some of the greatest challenges that are facing leaders today.
Mm. Um, I think one thing that I see is finding the courage in yourself to speak up, to say what you're thinking in difficult situations. They might be criticized, they might be put down, their career might be affected, so they hesitate, they don't say what they're thinking. So finding the courage to articulate what you're thinking in those difficult situations is a big challenge.
Can you give us an example, please?
Well, as I say, in the business world, let's say you're in a meeting with your boss and
Okay.
you think your boss's strategy is not appropriate or not right or it's not going to work. Do you say anything or do you sit there with your hands folded and just keep nodding? Are you a yes person? Speaking up is, it's courageous or takes courage, and it also can be dangerous. You speaking up, challenging the boss could jeopardize your career.
Hmm.
It could make you be part of the outside group from then on, that type of thing.
Okay.
So finding courage to speak up I think is important. I think another challenge is this idea of dealing with constant change.
Hmm.
I've talked to a number of leaders that, they've been through one wave of change activity after another, and they're kind of exhausted. And it's like they're saying, I just want things to go back to normal. Well, okay, what does normal mean? Change keeps coming at us. It just there's one wave after another. So getting used to and getting comfortable with dealing with that level of change can be challenging or is challenging. So I think those are some of the things I see.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that those are kind of like the directing, discussing, and delegating. Those are a lot of the complex challenges boiled down into three
Mm.
broad buckets, if you will. So I think leadership style is essentially an assembly of behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
consistently enacted
Yep.
behaviors.
Yep.
So, what leadership behaviors do you think will help people navigate finding the courage to speak up, finding common ground, dealing with constant change?
I think the more uh, comfortable and aware you get of your core beliefs and values and why they're important and why you feel so strongly about those and why you think those matter to you and to others, I think that type of thinking can give you the courage to articulate your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, if you the put the focus on not yourself, but helping the team or organization. So, if I think my boss's strategy is wrong or it's not going to work for the team or the organization, I care about the team. I care about the organization. I am going to speak up because it's not about me, it's about the team and
Yeah.
organization. So, looking at it that way helps me find the courage to say, well, wait a minute, boss, I think you're missing something here, and I really feel this way, and blah, blah, blah. So I think that kind of helps you reframe it that don't focus on yourself, focus on what's best for the team and the company. Um, that will be, a winner for you to find the courage and take action.
Yeah. I like the connecting things to values. Actually, the newsletter that I publish on LinkedIn, today's
Hmm.
article, the one here on December 10th, when we're
Hmm.
recording, is about facing fear. And one of the ways to face those fears, to have courage,
Mm.
you feel the fear and do it anyway, is to connect things, your actions to your values.
Yeah.
That's something that, this article kind of sussed out. And, it can even be in the how am I helping people, asking yourself that question, because it can even be I respect and care about the leader.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, hey, Mr. Smith, or, Mrs. Taylor, um, this is really hard for me to say, but I respect you. So I'm going to,
Yeah.
I'm going to say I have concerns because
Yeah.
I don't want you to show up. I don't want this to fall flat and for you to be left holding the bag.
I think that's a good point, Kate. I think how you frame it is very important. Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. Which gets me thinking about, because what I just exampled was sort of directly out of the Crucial Conversations. framework of contrasting, that when you have to be courageous, when you have to go into those high stakes, strong emotions conversations, that one really effective way to make certain people can hear and understand you is to be really clear. Like, I'm not saying this thing. Let me take away this negative response and let me clarify what I am saying. So I'm not saying that this is a bad idea or that you're wrong. I am saying that I respect you and I have concerns. That I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't speak up.
Right.
Which this leads to the last question that I will ask. Are there any resources you would recommend to people to help them as they are trying on and finding the best fit when it comes to their leadership style?
Well, I did write a book on this, and it does, it's very inexpensive also. It's on Amazon, but it provides not only some more information on the three styles, but it gives some examples of people using the different styles in different situations. So, I mean, there's a lot of practical applications included in the book. But I think, if anybody thinks about the three styles and, analyzes themselves in terms of, do they have a preferred style? Is the one they use most often? What could they do differently if they wanted to use one of the styles in a certain situation? Things like that. I do see some parents, some teachers, some athletic coaches that, use very much one of the styles most of the time. Going back to my grandson's hockey, his coach is a very directing style coach. He has even said to his assistant coaches, I don't want your ideas. I just want you to do what you're told to do. My grandson, again, captain of the team, he's got lots of ideas and things he's thinking about, how the team could improve and what have you. And he wants to present those to his coach. But as I say, his coach is very directing and, not open to that, style, which is unfortunate because everyone's got some ideas worth considering. And when you engage people in that way, it increases their motivation and their commitment to the team and things like that. So I guess I'm saying, get my book, read it. There's some good examples in there. But even if you don't get it, try some different styles, see how it works for you, test it out, experiment. As a leader, you got to experiment, try some new things and see, Sometimes we're afraid to delegate a project because it's like, oh my God, they'll screw it up. They won't do it right. They won't do it the way I would do it. Well, give them a chance, try it, see what happens, It's not gonna, it's not life or death, most of these things. So give them a shot.
Well, that goes back to the right thing, the right amount at the right time.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
You're not going to delegate.
Right. Something that's going to sink the ship.
Right. Yeah, exactly. To somebody that's never done it before that could end in death and destruction.
Exactly.
But if it's low risk, and the worst thing that could happen is we learn a lesson and maybe we've wasted a little bit of time, delegate away. Just like I think about my stepson this is years and years ago. He was trying to make his lunch. We were trying to teach him a little bit of independence. And he was making a horrible mess with the bread and the condiments. And my husband was like, I'll just do it. Like, you gotta let him make the mess.
Right.
We don't want to be baking his sandwiches for him when he's in his 20s.
Right.
We can clean this up. We can teach him to clean it up, in fact. And it was out of care for him, and it was out of concern for keeping our home, tidy. But It's no, sometimes you gotta
Mm,
let people make a mess
I
so they
agree.
learn how to
Yep,
do it and then learn how to clean it up.
right.
Yeah.
And
So,
they'll never learn if they don't make the mess a few times and
mhm,
figure out what they're doing and what they need to change to not make the mess. So
yeah,
I agree.
yeah. I want to add, so I talked about crucial conversations. That's something that I'll link. There are two tools that I think can be really helpful for people as they're trying to develop the awareness that they need and build their vocabularies, if you will, around styles and behaviors. I think the DISC assessment can be really effective for people. For one thing, its whole model is based on the concept of styles, behaviors.
Hmm.
Um, and that can give you insight into, well, here's what's natural to me. And here's
Hmm.
where, so I may need to put more effort into delegating because I have naturally, a style that could be maybe a little bit more controlling.
Hmm.
I also think the Clifton Strengths is a great resource, not only because it gives you self awareness and insight, but they've built out a model for strengths based leadership as well. So you're leading from your strengths and you're looking for other people's strengths as well
Hmm.
to be able to lead them best, to allow them to do things
Hmm.
well.
Yep.
And that helps you decide, in the moment or over time, what style is necessary right here. So I
Hmm.
think those are two or three resources for people that, in addition to your book,
Hmm.
I will have links in the show notes for.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, Paul, I think we are starting to get to a natural end. So I'm really curious what final thoughts you would have to share with us.
Well, I was thinking about what Professor Hersey would tell us in class numerous times, and his message to us as students was there is no one best style of leadership. Use a style that fits the needs of the situation. That was his mantra. We heard it numerous times, and I have come to believe he was 100% correct. Um, there is no one best style. You got to use a style that's going to help the person achieve and grow and develop, and it varies. It's like
Mm-hmm.
raising children. Early in
Yes.
life, we use more of a directing style. As they get a little bit older, we start discussing, what do you think? What about this? What would you do in this situation? And then by the time they're, seniors in high school, hopefully we're doing more direct delegating, letting them
Mm-hmm.
decide and giving them responsibility to take ownership. And then of course when they go off to college, they're on their own.
Mm-hmm.
They have to decide and they have to problem solve and they have to make decisions and all that. So it kind of fits the parenting stages, if you will, to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, we use these three styles all the time, but in general, we might use one style more when the kids are young. For the 3-year-old child, you're not delegating too much to them, right?
No, that's
No.
exactly
So
right.
anyway, that's
Yeah,
my final thought, I guess.
exactly. You know, I I always get a little squirrely when talking about parenting as a metaphor for leading because employees or the people that you're leading are, with a few exceptions, not children.
Yeah, right.
In the workplace, your employees are not children.
Hmm.
And that mental model of helping people grow and mature into contributing healthy, well citizens, it stands the test of time. So if for people that are parents or who are around kids and can kind of think about, all right, my little child needed to be told exactly how to go to bed. I couldn't just
Hmm.
say go to bed. I have to be as clear and kind with my newest
Hmm.
employees, with the
Hmm.
people that don't have the experience. And then can I help them grow and mature to a point where I can metaphorically send them off to college and not be concerned that they're going to make huge, huge mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So again, always a little hesitant. Employees are not children. And if we think about leadership as a way of supporting people in their growth and maturing so that they can be their best, most effective selves, that helps you make those decisions I've been talking about. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Circling back to this idea of what challenges are facing us right now, it's also the courage to decide whether or not I should be in leadership.
Yeah.
Leadership looks really appealing from the outside, and anybody that's done the job will tell you that it is super hard, particularly in those frontline middle management roles. There are a few jobs harder. And getting the right people in leadership is one of our challenges right now. Because we've had many years, even before our lifetimes, of not the right people leading where we needed the right people. So, on that lovely note, anything else? You know what? Here's the thing, though. I really do believe that we are, for more reasons than we could take the time to list right now, I think we are at such an exciting inflection point in the world of work, of being able to make things better, to help leaders more, to create better experiences for employees, and for people to find more fulfillment on the job. So even if there is this kind of storied past of us not doing the best as a workplace, I think there's a lot of opportunity facing us in the coming years.
Yeah, and I also think, I don't want to sound all negative, I think there's a lot of really effective and successful leaders and managers that are getting it done, are adding value, building great teams, bringing out the best in people, engaging them, delegating tasks left and right. I think there's a lot of good things going on, as you're saying as well. It's unfortunate that the bad apple stands out, and that's the one that a lot of stories are told about and what have you. But there's a lot of good people who are doing absolute the best they can.
Yeah.
And I used to tell my students that, there's no perfect managers or leaders, just like there's no perfect employees. Everyone's got strengths and weaknesses. Everyone's trying to do the best they can. Some people are more open to feedback and coaching than others, and it varies. So anyway,
I am reminded, and I can't think of a better place to kind of close, of Mr. Rogers talking about, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
Where you see helpers, you see leaders.
Yeah. Servant leader idea. Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. Well, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
It has been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm looking forward to finishing Leadership Styles myself, because I do have it on my Kindle now.
All right, great. I hope you enjoy it and give me feedback after you read it. And leadership is a great topic, and I love talking about it. So maybe we can do it again down the road sometime in 25.
That'd be fabulous, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in the comfy chairs. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others who are passionate about leading and learning. And don't forget, if you have a question for our new Comfy HQ series, I'd love to hear it. Check out the link in the show notes to submit your question and be part of the conversation. Until next time.